The vengeful dead are the most violent. 7 souls, consumed by the machinations of the night, have returned, corrupted by their death, full of anger and rage, consumed by their hate and life. They are unable to be swallowed by the mouths of the cemetery. Instead, they have been spat out to collect for a debt that will never be paid in full. Isaac, Kyle, and I met with Eli for lunch to discuss the return of the contractor and about previous victims that had returned as the wandering dead.
Other than the contractor that recently joined their ranks, you have Gordy Twins, Madame Dubois, Captain Ike, Teddy the Gun, and Mr. Weber. Each one had found their way into the cemetery one night, and the cemetery decided that the evil they possessed would be best suited as a vessel to consume more souls.
Eli explained, stroking the hairs of the beard he had grown since his retirement. What is it that those people have done that they are able to still be around today? Why is it that those names don't sound familiar at all? I asked, glancing at Kyle and Isaac for any look of familiarity. Well, I do know about the Gordy twins, Isaac said before taking a sip of coffee. They had been notorious train robbers back in the late 1800s. They had been tracked to our town and decided to hide out in the cemetery to avoid the law. The law never caught up with them, but the cemetery sure did. And Madame Dubois has been a French whore that prowled the town in the early 1900s that would kill anyone that paid for her services. She too was hiding in the cemetery when she was killed, but it was due to the woman of the town growing angry that she decided to blackmail them for hiring her to kill their unfaithful husbands, Kyle said before taking a bite out of a greasy burger. And the others? I asked, slightly annoyed that I have never heard of these people before or noticed them in the cemetery before.
Well, Captain Ike was a former naval captain that turned to moonshining. After a bad batch of moonshine poisoned half of this town down in Tennessee, he made tracks up to our town. A chance encounter in the cemetery confined him within it forever, and Teddy the Gun was a highway robber that died in a similar way as the twins.
Eli said, sitting back and pushing his empty plate forward. And Mr. Weber?
You see, Mrs. Weber had married the wrong man. She was a starry-eyed girl with dreams of a bigger life. She didn't have the acting chops to make it in Hollywood like she planned, and found herself back in her own town. Mr. Weber was charming enough and said the right things, but most importantly of all, he was wealthy. Mrs. Weber married him for his money, and everyone in the town knew it. It was also well known that she fancied a Cherokee boy that worked for her husband. When Mr. Weber discovered her infidelity, he chased after the two with an axe in hand. He lost his wife, but saw the Cherokee boy hop the fence into the cemetery and followed him inside. While the boy kept silent, knowing the talk surrounding the cemetery, Mr. Weber was too full of rage to keep quiet.
Eli finished his story, waiting for my next question. Why is it that I've never seen any of these other people? I asked, just as Eli anticipated.
I'm sure you've seen them plenty, they just don't resemble anything human anymore,
Eli answered.
The twins tend to take shape as balls of liquid fire and feathers with tar-covered branches. Madame Dubois now looks like a mossy succubus, while Captain Ike looks like a burning wendigo. Teddy is now some sort of a tree rock snake, and Mr. Weber has become what I can best describe as a spider made of hate and violence wrapped up in rust and broken mirrors.
So the most violent spirits, aside from probably Regents, are all victims of the cemetery, Kyle stated, setting the last of his burger on his plate, appetite lost for a moment.
Correct,
Eli retorted, placing money on the table to cover our meal. Why isn't Regent considered one of those 7? Isaac asked as the waitress collected the money with a smile, brushing her hair over her unsightly scar. Probably because he wasn't killed by the cemetery, just killed next to the cemetery. It would sort of explain why he has such a limited experiences, I pondered out loud.
That would be my assumption as well. To be honest, it is hard to pin down much of why anything happens in that cemetery.
Eli finished before excusing himself. We parted ways, and I wished Kyle an easy night for Thomas. Isaac told me he needed to go lie down. He had been visibly shaking at the description of what Mr. Weber had become. I waved him off before strolling down the street, lost in thought. I have seen hundreds of different spirits over the years. Very few were interested in telling their life stories, and even less seemed to be even remotely friendly. Mad Michael, in fact, never told me one thing about his life before death, and although he gave plenty of vague and auspicious predictions, he was overall a pleasant presence to have accompany you throughout the night. I want to know more about the residents of the cemetery, but my searching of the gravestones with Thomas has proven fruitless. We couldn't even find the grave of Mrs. McCarthy. The more I tried to learn about the otherworldly presence of the cemetery, the more it appeared that I would never find answers. There was an air of discomfort about trying to learn more. The town itself did not want its secrets to be unearthed. It was probably why the town as a whole was so fortunate for the citizens that didn't pry. It kept the town sedated and comfortable and unwilling to question the uncanny. I have heard plenty of tales of people disappearing under unusual circumstances, and time again, nothing really came out of it. People went missing. People died. That was the way of my small world. I was left with a thought echoing in my mind for the rest of the day. Would I be one of the people that went missing, or would I grow old and die and then be buried in my local cemetery? It takes nerves of steel to work here. Jacob has taken his training in stride. I was worried that after his first couple of weeks of training that he had just lucked out in not having to witness the horrors that can happen to trespassers, but he still showed up the next night after witnessing Mr. Weber feast. My town does not get many vagrants that blow into town. It is a long road into town with a lot of nothing between us and the rest of civilization. Even our nearest town is a 30-minute drive with a lead foot risking a speeding ticket from state troopers. When someone comes to town that is visibly at the end of their rope, it is common to see people try and offer a helping hand to assist in pulling them out of a funk. My father had made a wrong turn down a road when he was a young man, lost and unsure of his lot in life. When he arrived, the town welcomed him, and it wasn't long before he married my mother and had me in tow 6 months after their wedding. Hearing that someone had driven into town in a vehicle that was held together with zip ties, superglue, and faith finally lost its religion as he pulled into the gas station on the edge of town. His own faith had been in that of a neon nod that brought dreams of technicolor angels that erased the memories of a past he wanted to forget. When the gas attendant finally looked up from his book and noticed a car parked across 3 parking spots, he went out to see what was going on. A phone call later, the man was dragged into a jail cell. The last of the heroin shot up, but the remains of abuse raced up his arms. Released back into the streets, sober but with nothing, the vagrants prowled the streets in the same way the spirits prowled the cemetery. The deacon of the town's Lutheran church offered to put the man up in a motel. The pastor of the town's Baptist church gave the man food and an open invitation to the Wednesday and Friday AANA meetings. The owner of Aunt Sally's secondhand clothes had brought a week's worth of clothing and a part-time job until the man could get back on his feet without stumbling over. For the first couple of weeks, the man was taking the first steps to what could have been a long life in our town as the newest citizen to set roots in a place they did not intend to settle down in. I don't know where he found more LSD or why he decided that the best place to go to avoid his new landlord and sponsor was the cemetery. In the end, as he stumbled through the cemetery unable to tell what was real and what wasn't, this final trip was bad in every conceivable way. Jacob and I had initially ignored the man who was howling, as he looked no different than many of the souls that stagger and howl towards a moon shrouded by the trees. It wasn't until the howls became screams that our attention was drawn, and the spider I now knew as Mr. Weber wrapped his rusty tongue around the vagrant's arm before biting down with broken shards of teeth. Hairy appendages pierced his feet to the ground and forced his mouth wide. A second mouth unleashed clouds of bile and spiders into the screaming man. Shambling from their hiding spots, a dozen dripping specters of decay and disgust howled at the latest lost soul to beckon their call. Mr. Weber did not appreciate the reinforcements, and a sweeping arm swiped at the enclosing horde. Squirming from the horde, a large maggot opened its mouth, revealing rows of slimy fingers. The maggot swallowed Mr. Weber and the vagrant from below. Mr. Weber gave a wide smile as he was engulfed as pleasure and pain swallowed them both whole. Despite the sight, Jacob remained silent and calm, panic etched in his face as his body shook with fright. With nothing to clean, we walked away and walked in silence as the night gave way to dawn. The vagrant's disappearance was noted by the people of the town that had begun to grow close to him. When his fall back into addiction was noted and his trip to the cemetery was spoken, the atmosphere of worry was replaced with the town's surplus of apathy. Jacob and Thomas had both taken to the call of the cemetery. Their devotion to the vow of silence and procedure of cleaning the remains of those who break the silence has been admirable. I know that when the time comes, they will both be able to keep guard and eventually bring in the new generation of watchmen of the night. The cemetery director asked if Jacob is ready to enter into the rotation, and with a glowing approval, he will officially end his training. After a continued debate, we will hold off on requiring 3 guards a night until he finds a couple more people to hire on. I plan on taking full advantage of this opportunity and try to take a long-needed vacation. I have been wanting to travel for a long time. My entire life I have lived in this small town, only leaving the state a handful of times as a child. It would be nice to see the world outside of where I grew up. Although people will leave the town after they have moved in, it is a rarity to see. There isn't much reason to leave a place where tiny miracles happen all the time for a place where fortune always seems to find someone else. Isaac and Kyle are of the same opinion. A chance for a break would be nice. Knowing Kyle, he will likely do nothing more than sleep and eat an ungodly amount of junk food while watching endless reruns of NCIS and CSI Miami. Isaac, on the other hand, would prefer a chance to go out and see the world like he did when he was in the Navy, preferably before he is too old to really enjoy it. He deserves it. A moment's reprieve from the nightmares we face every night.